So as we've looked through muscle physiology, we've pretty much dedicated all of our time to that of the skeletal muscle. But do remember that we do have three different kinds of muscles. And so we have skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. And so found in three different areas. They have many of the same components within them as far as the proteins go, but they do look quite a bit different. Skeletal muscle is a multinucleated cell. So we have more than one nucleus per cell, upwards of 100 or so. Both skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle are striated. They both have striations to them. Cardiac muscle tends to branch, and so we see branches within the cells themselves. They don't just stay in a nice long cylinder like that of skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle looks nothing like the other two. There's no visible striations with them. They are single nucleated, much like that of the cardiac muscle. So they do have that going for them. The cells themselves tend to be kind of more of a spindle shape. They're thicker in the middle and thinner on the ends to them. So a little bit of a difference just in terms of the anatomy of the cells. When it comes to cardiac muscle, one of the special features that it does have is that it has what we call intercalated discs. And so these intercalated discs are what are found in between adjacent cells. And in those intercalated discs, we have gap junctions. And those gap junctions allow for movement of ions from one cell to the next. And so it's going to allow for us to move our calcium ions in between one cell to the next because the cardiac muscle doesn't have as well developed of a sarcoplasmic reticulum. And so much of the calcium for contraction is actually going to come from one cell to the next and ultimately come from the outside of the cell. And so here we can see that we have those gap junctions and our action potential, and as such, the movement of ions is going to travel in between those gap junctions and allow them to move from one cell to the next. And so it's going to allow for us to very quickly have that movement move through there. But because we don't have the sarcoplasmic reticulum just dumping a lot of calcium into the inside of the cell, that leaves us with a relatively long contraction. And so whereas muscles, skeletal muscle can get down into the neighborhood of around 10 milliseconds for contraction and relaxation, other ones are up in the 100 millisecond range and things like that. But skeletal muscle is around the 300 millisecond range. It's a much longer, prolonged type of a contraction because of that lack of sarcoplasmic reticulum. Smooth muscle lacks even less or has even less sarcoplasmic reticulum, so it's going to get most of its calcium from outside the cell as well. But one of the big differences that we saw in its lack of striation is how the actual proteins are put together. And so within them, they're not lined up into nice little sarcomeres inside the cells themselves. The individual cell is held together by dense bodies, as well as our filament bundles with our thick and our thin filaments. And so we have our thin filament there and our thick filament there. And as they line themselves up, essentially those bundles are going to pull their force between one dense body and the next. And this creates kind of a ringing type of a contraction of the muscle. Imagine kind of wringing out a towel. You're going to take that towel and you're going to twist it, and as it does so, it becomes visibly shorter and also thicker. And so it becomes thicker in the middle, it becomes thicker all around, and it becomes shorter at that same time. Because along those structures of fibers between our thin and our thick filaments, they're going to pull in kind of from side to side here. And as they do so, that shortens up the muscle in general and also allows for that twisting motion within the muscles themselves as well. When it comes to contraction of smooth muscle, the neurons are a little bit different as well. And so we can have here where we have a situation where we have vesicles. And so those individual vesicles on the individual cells have a swelling to them. And that swelling allows for the neurotransmitter to be released from the cells directly onto the cells, effectively creating a neuromuscular junction for the smooth muscle similar to that of a skeletal muscle. And so each individual cell here is going to, in a multi-unit, is going to allow for that contraction of the muscle to occur with that release of neurotransmitter from those points at that time. And so here we've now taken a good look at all of the physiology of muscle, and we can move on from there.